Good morning. Welcome. Subcommittee will come to order. Thank you for joining us for the hearing this morning on USDA's FY15 budget request for rural development. I would like to welcome Mr. Doug O'Brien, Undersecretary for Rural Development, Ms. Lillian Salerno, Administrator, Rural Business Cooperative Service, Mr. Tony Hernandez, Administrator, Rural Housing Service, Mr. John Padalino, Administrator, Rural Utility Service, and Mr. Mike Young, USDA's Budget Director. Thank you all for being here this morning. Glad you're here. At each of these hearings this year that we have held, I've mentioned about three themes that we're looking at and focusing on for FY15. They include robust oversight, ensuring appropriate implementation of our laws, and targeting funds to vital programs. These themes come together in Rural Development's budget request. Part of our oversight responsibility is ensure that USDA manages its programs well. Strong, appropriate management can prevent fraud, waste, and abuse, as well as build confidence in federal programs overall. USDA's Inspector General has encouraged all USDA agencies to focus more on managing as opposed to just implementing their programs. In particular, I believe the rental assistance programs needs improved management. This is an important program that helps some of the neediest in rural America. In the budget request, USDA is proposing several changes to the program to strengthen its control cost. I applaud USDA for making these suggestions and look forward to exploring them more in detail as we move forward today. Let me mention that Representative Farr and I have introduced legislation, H.R. 2729, to implement one of the proposals offered by USDA. The bill would allow USDA to access other federal databases to match wages and tax information. This would improve the integrity of the program by helping to ensure only those eligible receive this assistance. The Ways and Means Committee is considering the bill, and I hope that it can be acted even this year. USDA is in the process of implementing the 2014 Farm Bill that Congress passed a few months ago, and it appears to be off to a strong start. There are many new regulations and many modifications to existing regulations to come as part of this process. Even though the subcommittee will hold its last hearing for that we'll have this year next Tuesday, we'll continue to follow USDA's progress and interpretations of congressional intent. There's a saying in the South, and parents often say it to their children, I'm all about your business. Well, here in this subcommittee, we're all about USDA's business. One other issue related to congressional intent and the 2014 Farm Bill is USDA's proposal to consolidate several grant programs into a new rural business and cooperative grant program. Streamlining and efficiency typically are well received by this subcommittee. However, this proposal was not included in the 2014 Farm Bill and goes far beyond existing authority. We would like to know why the department is attempting to go down this path again when it has been denied authority to do so more than once by Congress. This past Monday, member requests were submitted to the subcommittee. We received almost 4,000 requests for our FY15 bill. As we start to review them, it is clear that we cannot fund every program and certainly cannot fund some programs to the extent that many would like. But that is the job of the subcommittee. We decide what is the most important, the most vital programs, and we do our best to provide the funding for them. Mr. O'Brien, in your written testimony, you spend about 4 pages describing USDA's efforts to support local and regional food systems. I'm happy to see that these new markets for producers grow. It is wonderful that we have a government and economic system in America that allows new markets to develop in response to consumer demand. But let me be clear, I support all types of agriculture. Each has its place. However, I'm concerned the USDA has placed too much emphasis on local and regional food systems. The FY15 budget proposals has dramatic reductions in some of the rural development's core programs. The single-family housing direct loan authorization level would be cut by $540 million. Water and waste disposal grants would be cut by more than $100 million. Yet the budget proposes to spend $24 million to hire 250 new employees. Of course, communities need jobs, schools, community facilities, water systems, electricity, and broadband access. These are all part of thriving rural communities. But I hope that USDA is not missing the big picture. Congress and USDA must address the core needs of rural America first before they emphasize one particular program, one particular trend, or one particular idea. At this time, I would like to recognize the ranking member of our subcommittee, Mr. Farr, for any comments that he might have. Mr. Farr.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for this expeditious schedule we've been on marking up and hearing from everybody. Obviously, rural development is key to, I think, our country's success. All the emphasis, all the formula funding that we develop at the state level and at state level and federal level, as the politics represents, I mean, we're one man, one vote, so the urban areas get a lot more representation than the rural areas get, more people there. And I think that this, in a modern America, where you have this incredible communication system now, that it's sort of the survivability. Can the local communities stay relevant to these changing markets and lifestyles? And I think the Secretary has been really keen on trying to do identify the most impoverished counties in America, and try to bring the whole federal basket, not just USDA, but all the other federal agencies together in his rural strategy. This whole area is my background as a county supervisor and even as a state legislature in doing rural economic development, and so I'm pleased to see that you're paying attention to these things. I share some of the concerns with the chair that it's not just about hiring more people, because I think we have a lot of silos out there that need to be busted or and used in collaboration, and that there are skill sets in the nonprofit world, in the state and local government capacities and things like that. I think we ought to be having carrots to encourage them to incentivize, essentially to upgrade your own self, help yourself improve. And I don't think the federal government does enough of that. So certainly you're an agency that's out there in discussion with all of these groups, and I appreciate it and look forward to the testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Farr. We're also honored to have the full chairman for the appropriations with us this morning, Mr. Rogers from Kentucky, and I'd like to recognize him now for any remarks that he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for the great hearings you've conducted so far. We will have on the whole committee, we will have had almost 100 hearings in the last few weeks. In fact, we marked up the first two appropriations bills in subcommittee yesterday, the first time, the earliest time that's ever happened. So the committee's working hard, and I appreciate the hard work of this subcommittee. Gentlemen, lady, thank you for being with us today for the fiscal 15 request. This agency covers some of the most important work that USDA does, and it's critical to the vision that the department has set for itself, helping rural America to thrive. That's certainly the vision that I have as well, and I appreciate that the Secretary took the time to visit my district back in January to announce the expansion of the Strike Force initiative in Kentucky. With so many coal industry job losses in my region, in fact, in my district alone, we've lost 8,000 mining jobs in the last several months. We need all the programs and support we can get that will help those current businesses and programs expand and make Kentucky attractive for new businesses as we move from a coal-based economy to something else. This program will also go hand in hand with the initiative that I've worked on with our governor called Shaping Our Appalachian Region, SOAR. to find ways that we can grow and find the next generation of economic opportunity and solid, good-paying jobs. And I want to also mention here quickly that Administrator Hernandez was recently in my district as well, last week, in fact, helping us keep in business a county hospital that he was so kind to work with us on to rescue from almost oblivion. So that hospital now is treating people in a very poor area for several counties around it. And the 250 employees still have their jobs, but more importantly, the health services are there that otherwise would not be, and I'm sure save lives. So, Mr. Hernandez, thank you again for being there. Some may think that USDA's rural development programs are relics of a bygone era. They may wonder if there is still a need in this country for help in getting rural utilities set up, or water treatment plants, pipeline systems built. I can assure you there is. In my district, we've used those programs to great effect. When I first came to Congress, thousands of eastern Kentuckians had what we call straight pipes, straight out of the commodes into the streams, dumping wastewater directly into streams. Towns had unreliable, aging water systems, if they had any at all. Less than a third of the people at that point in time had water in the home. Now, thanks to rural development grants and loans, and through the work of volunteers at a local nonprofit thing called PRIDE, Personal Responsibility in a Desirable Environment, our valleys have been cleaned, treatment plants built, families have the comfort of safe, reliable water that so many of us take for granted. In addition, through rural housing programs, many of my constituents have been able to move out of old, inefficient, dilapidated homes and raise their families in modernized homes with affordable payments. With all of those positive strides, I'm concerned that once again in this year's budget, your request proposes significant cuts to rural housing programs like the Section 50T direct loan and Section 523 mutual and self-help housing programs. We know the game the administration is playing, cut funding for useful programs in order to make room for new spending and create the illusion of budget savings. But choosing to cut from these rural programs time and again shows lack of respect for our rural communities and the constituents who have made these programs successful. In my district, an organization called Kentucky Highlands has used USDA's self-help housing program and Section 502 direct loan program to help low-income working families in Kentucky become homeowners. In 2011, a woman who had been the victim of extreme domestic abuse called Kentucky Highlands, hoping to find a home for herself and her young daughter. With some financial counseling and guidance from Kentucky Highlands, she was approved for a $66,000 direct loan, Section 502, and with the self-help housing program, she was able to build her own home for about $35,000 less than it would have cost to hire a contractor. That means that today she is living in a home that she can afford, and she built with her own hands. Without the self-help housing program and Section 502 direct loan program, she would not have been able to have the benefits of home ownership and the clean slate that afforded her and her daughter. That's what this is all about. Two other Kentucky organizations, Frontier Housing and the Federation of Appalachian Housing Enterprises, have participated in USDA's very successful demonstration program that not only helps low-income rural families become homeowners, but has significantly reduced the amount of time it takes for USDA to process its loan applications. USDA has reported that this program has helped the agency save $1.5 million to date. Because of this demonstration program, one of my constituents and his family were able to secure a 502 direct loan in half the time it normally takes USDA to process the loans themselves. And because of that loan, he now lives in a new energy-efficient green home in Rowan County, Kentucky. It seems to me that this is the sort of thing that we should be encouraging, saving money and allowing hard-working people like these constituents to put in the time and effort to gain home ownership partly with their own hands. I hope that you can begin to support these programs with a renewed emphasis rather than cutting them to make way for a wish list of new spending that we're likely not going to approve. So we look forward to hearing your testimony and your plans for supporting our nation's farmers and rural communities through these difficult budgetary times. We appreciate the hard work that you do and the dedication you bring to your chore. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for taking time to be here this morning and to attend our hearing. Mr. Ryan, let me go ahead and recognize you and for your opening statement. As you can just hear, where the bells are going off for votes, we'll be here for a few minutes before we have to go actually cast the vote, but we will do a short recess, come back, and then we'll finish up. So at this time, let me go ahead and recognize you for your opening statement.
Thank you. Chairman Adderholt, Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Farr, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to present the President's 2015 budget for the Department of Agriculture's Rural Development Mission Area. I'm accompanied this morning by Mr. John Padalino, Ms. Lillian Salerno, and Mr. Tony Hernandez, the administrators for Rural Development's Utilities, Business and Cooperatives, and Housing and Community Facilities programs, respectively. I respectfully ask that their statements be included in the record. Also with me is Mr. Michael Young, USDA's Budget Officer. A strong rural development mission area is important to rural America. Over the course of the last couple years, with tight budgets and sequester, our mission to increase economic opportunity and improve the quality of life for all rural Americans was threatened. Congress's action to provide resources to rural development mission area in 2014 has again placed our agency on stable footing. I would like to take the opportunity to thank the members of this committee for their continued support. As the committee knows well, USDA Rural Development has reduced its workforce by nearly 20%, or nearly 1,200 people since 2012. Furthermore, an additional 30% of our staff will be eligible for retirement in the next 2 years, a potentially devastating loss of institutional knowledge and experience. The FY14 appropriation, particularly in the salaries and expense category, provided resources to invest in people needed to fill knowledge and skill gaps, new critical hire support, much needed training for employees, and essential upgrades to informational technology are possible so that we can responsibly deliver and serve the program and service the programs provided for and funded by Congress. Today, I present to you the administration's proposed budget for rural development that includes additional investments in the people and communities of rural America. It is an exciting time to serve small towns and rural communities where there are historic opportunities in areas such as the bioeconomy and manufacturing and local and regional food systems. Rural development programs support these economic opportunities and work with partners to further leverage limited funds for communities and entire regions. Over the last 5 years, with this committee's support, we've invested $164 billion in rural America, including helping more than 800,000 families put a roof over their heads. Just in 2013, we were able to help 8.7 million rural Americans with improved electric service, 1.8 million new and improved water and wastewater systems, and we were able to help 11,500 rural businesses with grants and loans. 195 educational facilities were able to support 134 healthcare facilities like the one mentioned by Chairman Rogers. The results are impressive, and while the opportunities exist in rural America, this part of the nation is experiencing some disturbing trends. As my written testimony outlines with data, the USDA's annual report, Rural America at a Glance, points to stalled job growth in non-metro counties, an increase in poverty, particularly among children, and a declining population, the first real population loss in real terms since the federal government began tracking this statistic generations ago. These trends are deeply concerning because not only do they indicate current challenges in rural communities and the nation's economy, they also are a troubling harbinger for the future. That's why the 2015 budget proposal gives priority to investment in rural businesses that want to take advantage of emerging markets, and a focus on areas of greatest need. The budget aids in the development of locally and regional produced foods and other opportunities for rural business innovation, with proposals to fund programs such as the Business and Industry Loan Program, Value-Added Producer Grant, and the Consolidated Grant Program. USDA estimates the value of sales in local food, for instance, in the U.S. at $5 billion in 2008, with significant growth in just 3 years to $7 billion. In broadband, we doubled the grant funding and increased broadband access in rural communities to those least likely to have broadband. We propose to continue to help families in rural America put a roof over their heads through housing loans and rental assistance. We are carefully evaluating our investments and encouraging innovation to a greater number of rural Americans through investments that make a greater impact, through regional coordination and poverty targeting initiatives. The President's budget provides $661 million for the salaries and expense to support the delivery of direct and guaranteed loans and grants, technical assistance, and economic development strategies mentioned above. The budget allows us to hire FTEs to fill mission-critical skills shortages resulting from a 2-year hiring freeze. This is particularly important since Rural Development's loan portfolio has grown to more than $197 billion and continues to grow each month. Because of Rural Development's staff's diligence, I am happy to report that the portfolio has a delinquency ratio of less than 2%. We also recognize the need to think creatively about how to best serve high-need rural areas in the 21st century through more effective targeting of our resources and better utilization of our workforce. The President has offered a responsible budget that will help move rural development from transactional to transformational work to support long-term job creation and renewed economic expansion. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today before members of this committee, and I'm happy to answer your questions on the budget proposals at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Bryan. At this time, I'd like to recognize, again, the chairman, Mr. Rogers. He has 12 of these subcommittees,
Sure.
And so I'm going to go ahead and let him, because we have votes here shortly. So, Mr. Rogers, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for the nice courtesy. Time is short because we're due on the floor immediately. But I'm puzzled why you're proposing to cut these programs that I've talked about that are proving so successful with sweat equity and with helping people do the right thing. Why are you cutting those programs?
Chairman Rogers, thank you for that question, and I also I just want to mention thank you for your leadership in SOAR. It's something that I've tracked closely, as has the Secretary, and other initiatives, including Strike Force and, of course, Promise Zones. There's a lot of good things happening in eastern Kentucky.
Yeah, thank you.
Certainly take your point on the concerns about the proposed budget on 502 Direct and 504. 523, thank you. I'll mention, then I'll ask Administrator Hernandez to expand, that the 502 Direct program obviously is a foundational program for rural development and has been for decades. The budget authority request in the 2015 budget actually does increase from $24 million provided in 2014 to $26 million in 2015. And in fact, if we look at our proposed budget for 2014, we actually increased that budget authority by well over 2 times. So the issue, of course, here is subsidy rate, and the formula has caused a decrease in the program level, even though a proposed increase in budget authority. I'll ask Administrator Hernandez to talk about that a little bit and to anything else you might want to cover.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're very committed to this program. As you know, Mr. Chairman, this is a program that really goes after folks that are very low-income folks. The 523 program, self-help, uses a sweat equity as a way to get people into homes that probably wouldn't get there any other way. Right. And in your state, we just, as you celebrated with us, about new 13 homes that are solar panels. We're very excited about this program. What we're trying to do is make sure we have the right products for the right types of customers. So we have 3 types of products. We have the guarantee product, we have the direct 502 Direct program, and the 523. What we're trying to do is make sure we have sufficient funds in each one of those, and we believe based on the funding that's appropriate right now, these programs are funded in the level that we think we can operate. To demonstrate our commitment that's growing, in addition to the additional $2 million that we've asked for in this budget, we're actually trying to find ways to improve the implementation of these programs. And part of this, how do we make these programs work better? And to do that, we are trying to streamline the 502 Direct. Right now, as you know, it's a manually driven program, one loan at a time. It takes very long. And so what we're trying to do is to improve what we call the loan origination system, to move more towards automation. When we are successful in completing that, that will reduce the time, which will allow us to help more families. It will cost us less, and we think we're going to change more people's lives through this wonderful program, the 502 Direct program. For the 523, that's usually the financing we do use for sweat equity home ownership. We hope to use that program more. And at the current levels, we're asking about the same amount of dollars we asked last year, which was $10 million for the sweat equity program, the self-help program. We believe that's the efficient level for us to help this year.
Well, I thank you for your work and your dedication to these programs. They do work, and it helps real people out of real difficulties. Now, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. At this time, what we'll do is we'll do a recess. We're going to go cast a couple of votes, and we'll be back to reconvene just in a few minutes.
Very good. Thank you.
Next, on our next round, or really our first round, but our second convening, wanted to ask a little bit about to Mr. Hernandez. I want to ask you about the Rural Housing Service, some issues in your portfolio. USDA proposes a significant change to the Rural Assistance Program to provide stability for our program and greater flexibility for Rural Housing Service to manage it. The changes include, among others, a $50 minimum rent, eliminating automatic contract renewals, and allowing partial funding of contracts to track with continuing resolutions. Tell us a little bit about this proposal and your justifications for how this would be implemented.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're very excited about these proposals because we've learned a lot from what happened last year in our budget year. As you know, it was a very challenging years for us as we try to implement this program. And we want to thank you for the funding for last year that you funded us at $1.1 billion, which is sufficient for us to fund all of our products for our rental housing assistance grants. And this year we're asking for $1.88 billion with these proposals in them. The purpose of the proposal is to help improve the predictability of what the program costs. Right now, there are some changes with our contracts. They're renewed. We're trying to find a way to have a contract time we call a 12-month contract and a fixed rate, or what we call eliminating renewals, so we can know when they're going to happen, automatic renewals. When we do that, we're trying to find a way to be more predictable with the program costs, to keep them in with that time frame. At the same time, we're trying to make sure that, as you talked about, enhancing the integrity of the program, trying to make sure that only people that are eligible for the program do that. And with that legislation, that means we can use this database that we haven't had access to before. By having access to that database, we can make sure only those folks that are eligible can get in there. So that's that. For the minimum rent, we're looking for the long term. How do we make sure this program is funded and operates for the long term, not just this year, but forever? We believe rental assistance is a program that's so important in rural America, and we need to find a strategy that we believe the Secretary has articulated very well. What are we going to do for the long term? So based on our experience last year, we're trying to make sure we have proposals that give us funding for the long term. And one way we believe that is helpful is to have a minimum rent. This is not something new. Minimum rents have been around a long time. HUD's had minimum rent for many, many years. And we think we have a proposal that really helps mitigate the impact. We know there will be impact on some customers, but we think we can mitigate that with what we call the hardship clause. And part of that is to make sure if you cannot afford to pay, if there are some other hardship criteria that we're developing with our partners. And these decisions will be made on the local level. It's not made in D.C. It will be made at the property level, where the manager who knows the customers, knows what they're making, and understands all the income levels that are being generated there, will make those decisions. We believe that flexibility is important for the management down at the local level, but we need this authority to make sure this program is viable for the long term, not just the short term. So this is not a short-term solution. This is a long-term solution taken together. So I don't want to take one at a time. You need to put this minimum rent with eliminating automatic renewals, with some other management tools to make sure we can have what we call selective renewals based on the priorities of those properties. Let me talk about that just a little bit. Right now, the budget appropriation language says you have to renew based on first come, first serve. We don't think that's the best way to manage this program. We have priority properties, more rural, more poverty properties, and so we're trying to make sure we have a tool that allows us, in partnership with our stakeholders, to develop the criteria so we can select those properties that should be renewed when there isn't enough dollars to go through. That's part of that. And the last one is we're trying to make sure that we try to increase our partnership, and these tools we think allow for that management flexibility. And with that, it's a shorter term contracts. If we have a continuing resolution, right now we have to do a long contract. If there's a continuing resolution, we won't have enough money. So we're looking for some flexibility to have a 3, 6, or 9-month contract so we can be better managers of these properties. We don't have the right tools right now, so we need your help to give us the tools to be better managers and stewards of the taxpayer.
So if I understand you correctly, if a tenant cannot pay the $50, then y'all have this hardship clause that can come into play?
Yes.
That they can work around that.
Yes, sir.
How many tenants do you estimate would be in a position to take advantage
Mr. Chairman, we
of
think
this?
about 10% of our total population would be eligible for that hardship clause.
Right.
So again, we have about 284,000 folks, so only 10%.
And how do these proposals compare with authorities available to the Department of Housing, Urban Development, and Veteran Affairs?
It's very similar to HUD's and HUD's had success in implementing theirs for a number of years. And actually, our relationship with HUD is very good, so we talk about what they've learned, how they would do it differently. So we've developed this proposal in communication with them. We think it's going to be very effective.
Okay, my time has expired. Mr. Farr.
I'm always impressed of how many sort of silos or mini silos there are in your agency. It's more than, it's like any other department in USDA. And I know there's some consolidation efforts and some concerns about that. I mean, you do electrical grids, clean water, housing, broadband, business loans, cooperative loans, grant loans, technical assistance programs, and the list goes on, and all different kinds of categories. In essence, you think that almost any need of a rural area would be under one of these programs. And I really we just chatted for a second, but I've run up against a problem, and I just can't find any help. And maybe the help might be just the brain trust that you have in your department. But I represent Big Sur, California, which everybody knows of as just probably the most beautiful coastline in the world. And it's about 70 miles long of rural area. There's no communities. There's no local government there. The county is the lead government. But you've got a lot of federal partners, the Forest Service, which is in USDA, the Marine Sanctuary, which is in Interior. The highway has been declared a federal scenic highway, an all-American highway, which is not a federal highway, but at least that designation is a federal transportation department. You got some of the Department of the Army with the Fort Hunter Liggett Training Base. And we have some BLM, no, I guess no BLM land there, but and state parks and state highways and so on. The one thing we have, an endangered species, one being a condor, and those probably birds, I'm guessing the amount of money in each bird's over $1 million, and they ran into power lines. PG&E power lines, and they've got to do something about it. Their idea is we'll just make thicker lines, but it's a scenic highway, and we've got the whole effort here. And the question is, we're trying to underground this, and there's no place where there's any help. I mean, there's just these little mining undergrounding funds that the county puts together that essentially are for rural, urbanized area where people are trying to get underground in a little unincorporated area, but nothing of this, and there's no rate base there. There's no tax base or rate base by utility users. It's also a need because we have schools and a lot of state parks and huge tourism traffic. I mean, it's a great place to broadband if we're going to do something like this. So I just wondered if there's anything in the department where we could get some assistance. This is essentially a rural problem with an urban price tag. Mm-hmm. And how do we go to get help when, even with the sophistication of California and all its local governments, we don't have any one-stop solution there either?
Congressman, I'll talk just briefly and then ask Administrator Padalino, who is sort of on top of our infrastructure programs. I'll talk just a little bit about the siloing. We do have, and this committee knows very well, 40-plus programs that we administer along, the different business, cooperative housing, and infrastructure. I think the comparative advantage that rural development has is that in the field, that's all brought together. We have people who sit in the same office, many times, as you know, sit with their FSA and NRCS colleagues who can knit together these programs to assist and support rural communities. That's in the field. That's the most important place where we break down silos. We've worked very hard, I think you know this, sir, through the national efforts, through Strike Force, through indeed the White House Rural Council to break down other silos.
Have you been able to break down the silo between HUD and you on housing? We had a real problem with farm worker housing where we needed HUD as a partner, and I think we actually did the first breakthrough in the history of the country in a joint project, but is that continuing?
Well, I can tell you that we work very closely with HUD. In fact, 2 days ago, the Chief of Staff and a couple others were in my conference room talking about some housing and community economic development issues, and that's the second meeting I had with senior folks with HUD just this week. So I think we do continue to build those relationships on farm worker housing and other, but I do want to go back and make sure you get a response on your first question on the issue of the lines around Big Sur. Administrator Padalino.
Sure. Thank you for that question. One of the first steps, if there's any problem in a rural area to do, would be to reach out to our state office and to talk to our state director, who's really our person on the ground who can help bring multiple resources together, engaging in some of the activities.
We have a multi-agency council with every single agency that has any jurisdiction in Big Sur, and it's about a 15-member board, and so it's probably the most informed community in the United States, with that council meeting every 3 months with all the elected officials there too. But we don't have any solution for this undergrounding issue.
And what we probably need to do is follow up with your staff to learn what assets are in the ground. At the Rural Utility Service, we have an electric loan program that has over $45 billion.
See, it's a loan program, and who has to pay that loan back?
The users of the system.
Well, there's not many people. This is it. You've got probably less than 100 telephone subscribers. Now you got some big, huge businesses, Post Ranch, $1,000 a night. But that's still not going to be a ability to pay for this project. So I'll work with you, but we're really looking for grants or foundation help that might help.
Mr. Nunley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In Mississippi and certainly across America, rural water projects are pretty important to us. And the farm bill that we passed earlier this year provided $150 million to help reduce the backlog on rural water projects. So just tell me where we are on that backlog, what are the plans to utilize that money, and where we're going to be this time next year.
Absolutely. Thank you, Congressman Nunley. It was very good to be with you at the water rally earlier this year. The obligation, getting those dollars out the door, those mandatory dollars from the Farm Bill and the water program are actually the priority for us in Farm Bill implementation. And I'm going to ask, again, Administrator Padalino to talk about where we are in that implementation.
Okay, thank you for that question. The Congress provided $150 million that we worked, one of the requirements was to make sure that we use that money for projects that were already pending. And we prioritized those projects, and we're obligating those projects right now, and all of those funds will be obligated by the end of April. The backlog right now is about $2.4 billion. And I think what that represents is that there's a continual need for investment in infrastructure. As systems get older, they require new investments. As a community may grow or decrease, it requires different kinds of investments. Over the years, we've seen the backlog go from $1.5 to $3 billion. And if you look at some of the data that's out there, the needs are in the hundreds of billions of dollars. But what we do is work with the communities to help develop their applications, get those to a complete stage, and then begin the underwriting. And back to that $150 million, that's grant dollars that goes with a loan dollar to do a loan grant combination.
Thank you. All right, today the Office of Inspector General is releasing a report on the duplication in rural business cooperative service loan and grant programs. My guess is some of your work's been made more complex by actions of the Congress. But tell me, what input did you give into the crafting of the Farm Bill and into this budget to help alleviate this issue?
Thank you for that question. I'll talk about that in our FY15 budget proposal, we do propose to consolidate a number of our business grant programs, and that's in partial reaction to concerns raised in that OIG report. We work closely with the OIG, and as they conduct their reports and investigation, make sure that they have the best information possible. And we see OIG as really a great partner in helping reform our programs over time. In terms of the Farm Bill new authority that consolidates the RBEG and RBOG program, we were certainly asked and provided technical assistance. I think that the authorizers saw earlier proposals that we had done and also looked at not only OIG but GAO reports and embrace some of that streamlining. We appreciate the Farm Bill streamlining those two programs, and look forward to continuing to look for, and as our proposal indicates, other ways to streamline and make more efficient the delivery of our programs.
Well, I mean, it's certainly no secret to any of us. We're in some tough budget times, and we're going to have to work smarter because the needs aren't any less.
Absolutely.
One final question. Rural broadband's pretty important to the area I represent and to all of rural America. So just tell me what you're doing in the area of rural broadband. There was a report last year from OIG that was critical on some duplication and mismanagement of funds. So tell me where we are on that.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. I'll just mention a couple of things, and then again ask Administrator Padalino to talk about the broadband and telecommunication programs. We were able about 4 years ago with a big influx of funding through the Recovery Act to really make some big investments in harder to reach areas. We want to continue that momentum. We actually, in this FY15 budget proposal, it's one of the few places that we actually increase program, and that is in the broadband program. So we certainly recognize that as a foundational 21st century infrastructure, and I think our budget proposal indicates that. I'll ask Administrator Padalino to expand.
Well, thank you. The first thing I think is the Recovery Act that you mentioned. We funded 2 projects in your district to help expand access to broadband for rural Mississippi. The OIG report, we've worked closely with OIG throughout they've had funds provided to make sure and to give us guidance on how to manage the program. We've worked closely with them and responded and issued guidance based on their suggestions. Over 70% of the Recovery Act funds have been dispersed, and we're working with projects to get those complete. I think the need is still there. There's 6.5 million rural households that lack access to broadband, and it's a need that we're going to have to keep focused on over the next few years.
Thank you. Access to rural broadband is to my children's generation what access to electricity was to my grandparents' generation. And as we make that access available, it will transform rural America. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Laurel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. If I could just say one thing, I have this pin on today that says "Witness to Hunger," and it's obviously not the topic of this hearing, though you do deal in rural America, and there certainly is a lot of poverty and a lot of hunger in rural America. And if you have a moment, anyone, and I say that to my colleagues on the committee, that I go by the Rayburn foyer, look to the women who are the witnesses to hunger, see the pictures of themselves and their children, read the commentary about how they try to make do and how they try to literally survive. And one woman, I read the commentary of one, and she's dubbed her son the king of bananas because he loves bananas, and she tries to give him a banana every day. But when it gets to the last week or so of the month, when the food stamp allocation has run out, she has no ability to be able to get fresh fruit and vegetables. So she buys what she can, and whether it's nutritious or not. But it's really pretty poignant, and when you do see the photographs and listen to these very courageous people who are in a very difficult economy trying to make their way. And I mentioned in this today because in this committee we do have the wherewithal to help to try to make a difference, and that is so very, very true for our rural communities, and oftentimes it's hidden in rural America versus urban America, and we need to not only focus on some of the other areas that affect rural America, but the hunger issue as well. And with that, I will, I think, reiterate what my colleagues have been talking about, and what is a real concern to me is in this the rental assistance program, in which we are looking at the $50 rent, tenant rent, minimum tenant rent. The research by the National Housing Law Project shows that the minimum rents would only impact the very lowest income tenants. And those who are making under $2,000 in annual income, that is pretty significant. And I heard you say, and who are these households? Elderly households. Nearly 60% of households are occupying rural development rental housing, and they're 62 years of age or older. Disabled households. Person with disability comprise nearly 48% of these households. Single female households comprise over 69% of total one-person households. Female head of multi-person households. 75% of the multi-person rural development rental households. Now, you talked about a hardship fund, and you talked, but not in the percentages. How many families are affected? 10,000, 50,000? What are the numbers here? And how extensive is this hardship program that will, and how would it work to help these people who are, can you fathom an annual income under $2,000? So where do these people go? What do they do if we're not providing assistance? These people will be gone forever. The program may last forever, but these folks are gone forever. Mm-hmm. It's not about the program. It's about the people that we serve.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and Congresswoman, I will ask Administrator Hernandez to address the precise questions that you ask. I do just want to mention, in the spirit of the first part of your statement, that that rural development with Secretary Vilsack's leadership and direction is focusing more and more of our resources in the hardest to reach, in the poorest places, as evidenced by the work around strike force. And in fact, what we've done across the board throughout all of our programs is done a very rigorous analysis of where our dollars go. And we have a goal for each one of our state directors to increase dollars into persistent poverty census tracts, for instance. But I will ask Administrator Hernandez to talk about the details of the hardship exemption.
Thank you very much. We agree with you. We're trying to make sure this is a minimum impact to our customers. We have the same passion to try to keep people in housing. The minimum income is right around between $10,000 and $12,000 for the folks that live there. The hardship clause that we have is a financial hardship. So those folks who are at $2,000 probably would not have to pay because they would be exempted because of the hardship clause. Let me list you some of the criteria that we would use that at the local level, not D.C., but at the property level that the managers would make a decision on. First, has the family lost eligibility or is waiting for a decision for eligibility on the program? That's the first one. Has a family been evicted because they've been able to not be able to pay minimum rent? Then they would be exempt again. Has a death occurred in the family? Has a family income decreased because of a loss of jobs? So we're trying to find ways to make sure that people have a good place to live. But again, we're looking at the big picture. How do we make sure this program there is to provide service to those customers? So when we made these proposals, not just one proposal, there's a number of proposals in there. They're all together. We believe will make the program more viable, provide great service to the folks, but everybody contributes. We contribute on our health care by we contribute lots of different ways. So this is another way to, I think, to make the program viable and dedicate the service to make sure there's a safe and decent housing for those folks.
My time is up, but you know, we're talking, how many people?
284,000 people that receive rental assistance. Not all of those.
No, but who are the, you know, the lowest, the people who are making the $2,000 or less?
They would probably be exempt from making a minimum rent.
Okay, well, I just think that you have to rethink this piece because it's really not moral to let these people go. I'd rather see the program go than let these people go at the moment.
Okay.
Ms. Fortenberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Thank you all for appearing before us today. I want to talk back to Mr. Farr's point about the silos and apply this conversation in a couple different areas. One area that I'm keenly interested in and have watched the developments for a long time, and I think it's important public policy priority, is in the whole area of biofuels, a bioeconomy. You have a decided focus there, which I think is important. But I think it is necessary to have a conversation about the spectrum of renewable energy, bio-based economy initiatives that are underway, not only in your department, but in the Department of Energy, even in the Department of Defense. Because what we don't want to see, we obviously want to all see effective delivery of services for the lowest possible cost. It is pretty difficult to get the full breadth of understanding of where all of these various initiatives are embedded. We should be working toward the same goal. If you could provide some commentary on that. Secondly, in regards to silos, you've had some extensive conversation, Administrator Hernandez, on the certain consolidation may not be the right word, but reforms within the housing programs. I want to understand, though, in light of what you have said in terms of more effective delivery, how the cuts to the 502 direct loan program will be sustainable in light of the expanded mission you've just talked about. In that regard as well, the consolidation of certain grant programs for business assistance. And I want to talk about a smaller one, the Rural Micro Entrepreneur Assistance Program. The potential, as you proposed, for folding it under a mega grant program could potentially lose its niche focus, which has helped save or create thousands of jobs for a pretty good, fairly low cost. So if that's too much information, I can go back and repeat each one, but
I think we'll talk about the energy issue and RMAP, and then we'll talk about the housing issues, if that's okay. Sir, thank you for those questions. Certainly on renewable energy, it is, as you know very well, to Secretary Vilsack, an issue he understands very well and he sees as a great opportunity in rural America, and he's a great champion for it. Having seen what can happen in his state of Iowa, which is also my state of Iowa, so I certainly understand. USDA, through the reauthorization of essentially all of the renewable energy programs in the Farm Bill, is provided the authority and some mandatory dollars, and then we ask for some more discretionary dollars to be able to help build that entire supply chain, everything from basic research all the way to making sure that consumers have access. Rural development's role, and I'll ask Administrator Salerno to talk a little bit more about this, is towards the end of that. Our strength is in financing small businesses and financing manufacturers, and in this case, biorefineries that make renewable fuels or bioproducts. That, of course, is in our REAP program that received, again, mandatory dollars, and that we seek discretionary dollars for, as well as the 9003 program. So that's our role. We work very closely with the agencies, with the Office of the Chief Economist, to make sure that our plan is knit together. And in fact, statutorily, rural development sits on the Bioeconomy Research and Development Board. That includes energy, that includes defense, that includes EPA. We meet monthly. The Undersecretary of Rural Development is a co-chair for that, at this time, actually, our Undersecretary for REE, Kathy Witecki, is serving in that role. So there's a lot of collaboration. But I'll ask Administrator.
Could I interrupt you for one moment, please? This is interesting. The Bioeconomy Research and Development Board, which is bringing together cross-jurisdictional agencies to focus on a singular goal. I'd like to see your chart from that. Obviously, there's a chart somewhere that shows the linkages between the spectrum of programs we have in this regard.
Absolutely.
Can you provide that for me, please?
We would love to share that with you in the very near future. Thank you, Congressman. Administrator Salerno.
Yes, I think actually I have a chart that I will provide you, but it'd be great to have a briefing. But you're right, there's a lot of activities going on throughout our agency and, of course, across the federal family. But we do work with the Department of Energy under the Rural Development Mission Area. Of course, we have the REAP program as well as the Rural Economic Development Loans and Grants that provide assistance to promote with electric and telephone utilities that are available to do types of energy efficiencies. We have the Rural Business Enterprise Grants, and then, of course, we have our big program, the 9003s, to promote less fossil fuel, and we have a current application going on with that. But the Secretary's been very vocal about the bioeconomy, and it's dissipated across the entire USDA family, and we look forward to an opportunity to come and tell you about all the. We are organized about doing it. It's just it goes across several agencies.
Well, sometimes these hearings get a bit artificial because we zone in on an area that's getting a reduction, and we're not stepping back and thinking about, okay, what is the purpose of all of these narrower programs to provide adequate rural development, part of which is a movement toward bio-based economy and sustainability. And that's what I'm trying to gain some assurances that we are not working independently, we're working interdependently, even with other agencies. I sit on the other Energy and Water Subcommittee as well, and ask similar things. So that would be helpful if you could provide that. Now, the folding into the microenterprise loan program, who is going to address that?
Yes,
if you could briefly do that. Our timer is messed up, and so we're over time. So that
I'm looking at a green light. That's why
I know. That's why I wanted to clarify. We're having some technical.
Felt something wasn't right.
We're having some technical difficulties here. So, but go ahead and summarize quickly your answer, and then before we go into Ms. Pingree.
Sure. Thank you for the question on the Rural Microenterprise Grant and Loan Program. That's the only federal funds designated for those small micro enterprise development organizations.
Right.
We know that to be those companies that are less than 10 people, that those are some of the big drivers.
This is where most
creation.
jobs come from in
Right.
America, by the way. But this is in danger of being enfolded into a mega grant program, as I understand it?
You're talking about the micro enterprise, right?
If I might, sir, the grant authority under RMAP would be maintained under the consolidated grant program, so that those technical assistance grants to assistant organizations that are focused on micro entrepreneurs would have access to funds under that consolidated grant program. So that authority, we envision the authority would still be there. We'd envision that we'd continue to support that.
But do you think you'd lose the focus of the original mission, which again has, from my understanding, been fairly successful?
I would certainly take your point. It's something that we would guard against, because micro-entrepreneurs, as you said, are the true job engines in rural places. Of course, the reason we looked at doing this is to consolidate, instead of 5 different NOFA or NOSAs over time and all the work that it takes, that we'd be able to do it once, but we'd be able to continue to serve all these different functions.
I may need to come back to this. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Pingree, and bear in mind, what I'll do is I'll just tout when it gets about 5 minutes, so I don't know what light will be, color it'll be, but we'll just go with the tapping. We've got a correct timer up here, so Ms. Pingree.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I promise I will listen closely for your tap. Well, first, thank you very much, all of you, for being here today, and Deputy Undersecretary O'Brien, thank you very much for taking the time to come and visit us in Maine when we were announcing the REAP funding for 10 Maine farms and businesses. It was nice to have the opportunity to travel with you around our state a little bit to see some of the activity going on there, and I think you got to see a wide range and then meet with several communities, so really appreciate the outreach on that. And, just without getting too carried away here, rural development is such a critically important issue, I know, to everybody on this committee in their home states, but in Maine, I think it's over $400 million a year that we benefit from, and everything from value-added producer grants to the housing things you're hearing about today, water. I mean, it's just so critically important for us, and I know you administer a lot of programs, and there are a lot of concerns, but I just want you to know how much we value it. We appreciate working with Virginia Manual in our state, and there's, I think, 60-some employees. It's just a really big part of what happens in a very small state like mine. big geographically small with people and very small with money and resources usually, so you're critically important. I just want to ask a, I hope, brief question about rural utility service and the high energy cost grants. So a program that we hear about again and again, and I think you heard about it that day you were visiting us, was the Rural Utility Service High Energy Cost Grants. This grant program is of particular interest to the island communities that I represent off the coast of Maine. I happen to live on one, and often people think that is somewhat obscure, but there are 14 year-round island communities. They're an important part of our economic base, our fishing base, and critically important to our culture and history in Maine. Many of those islands in particular aren't able to tap into the electric grid, so they rely heavily on diesel generation and some alternative fuels. Some islands, like Matinicus, which is a big fishing community, pay up to 70 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity, 4 or 5 times what folks on the mainland would pay in our state, and we don't have low electric rates to begin with. I think some of the people from Matinicus might even have talked to you in that meeting that you visited. So getting these costs under control is vital to the survival of some of these communities, which is why these grants are so important. They help the islands do energy efficiency work, make it possible to include renewable energy. Some of our islands are powered by wind power, thanks to some of this assistance. So you can imagine that I'm disappointed to see the President's budget has proposed eliminating all funding for high energy cost grant program. Can you explain your rationale here? I can't stress how vital this program is to Maine island communities, and give me a little advice. What should I say to these constituents about why these cuts are adopted, and how they're going to handle losing that support? And I can just say, after a long winter in Maine, it's not that fun to meet with a group of angry fishing communities who say, wait a minute, how do you expect us to survive? Where's our lifeline here?
Thank you for that question, and thank you for hosting me for what was a great tour that made a deep impact on my understanding on particularly remote communities and island communities at the end of the day. And you do have people who certainly exercise their right to vocalize concerns, which is a great thing about going to New England and traveling across the rest of the country. I think I'll ask Administrator Padalino to talk about some of the other things that we can do to help support those folks who live in those types of communities. So, Administrator Padalino.
Thank you for that. I think this request reflects the tension between a tough budget environment and also trying to be creative with our solutions. And since last year's budget request in the electric loan program, we issued a new regulation in December that opened the electric loan program up to energy efficiency activities, distributed generation, demand-side management, and small-scale on- and off-grid, small-scale renewable. And those weren't available under that loan program before, and those are the same activities that a typical high-energy cost grant recipient would be exploring. So I think I'd be happy to work with you and your staff to educate you more on the program. I think it's a great program that provides enormous opportunity for our rural communities, not just for their electric needs, but for economic development, where we can help reduce the per home electric cost, and we can also create jobs as we make the homes, the building envelopes more efficient, as we help people produce power right on their rooftops, and be happy to work with you more on that.
Great. Well, I'd certainly like to know more about that, and we'll get more in depth with you at another moment, but thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Valdeo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to associate myself with the comments made earlier by Chairman Rogers. I understand he talked quite a bit about self-help enterprises, and obviously that's something that's really important in my district, and I've always enjoyed seeing community build, families build their own homes, and the type of pride and ownership that goes along with that. Peter Carey, President and CEO of Self-Help Enterprises in Visalia, has been someone that's worked really hard for us in the Valley, and obviously his 40-year tenure did a great job for us, so I just want to recognize him as well. But going to something a little bit different, USDA's farm worker housing programs provide critical housing assistance to some of my district's most vulnerable residents. Self-Help Enterprises has used this program to build the Rancho Lindo Apartments, a 44-unit affordable rental housing project in Lamont, California. There was a great need for this housing, and the development rented up in 24 hours. There was a long waiting list now. Rancho Lindo was financed with Section 514 loans and Section 516 grants. USDA's farm labor housing program, a total of $16 million is proposed in fiscal year 15, which will provide $23.8 million in loans. This, the loan amount proposed is $1 million below the current level. Grants remain at $8.36 million. This will finance only about 840 units, which of course falls short of the need. As you know, the vast majority of these applications, 26 out of 38 for fiscal year 13, came from California, and I understand there is a cap, and California only gets 2 applications funded. My question is this: is this the kind of program we should be investing in? Isn't this a program we should be investing in? And there's a demonstrated need in California. We need farm workers to pick crops and help sustain the ag economy, so farm labor housing is really necessary. I'd like to understand why USDA can't do a better job with a $16 million request for these programs when it has a budget of more than $20 billion in discretionary funding. If you agree, then shouldn't the USDA be asking for more? If you disagree, please explain why.
Thank you, Congressman, for that question. That is we certainly understand that that's a critical program in California and in many parts of the country, and that program, along with many others in the budget, did sort of fall into that category of the fiscal situation that we find ourselves in, and the overall reduction that we propose in our rural development budget. I'll ask Administrator Hernandez to talk a little bit more about that program and things that we can do to make sure that we can serve that community as much as possible.
Thank you very much. Farm worker housing is very important, not just in creating communities, because that's what we're doing, creating a place where people can live, and so they can also work. And so creating jobs is so important, and the linkage between jobs and housing is important. As you know, housing is a conduit to family, community, and neighborhood. So we're trying to create these right vehicles through the right tools to have people in housing. So this is just one of the tools. As you know, we had 33 applicants the past year. What we're trying to do is spread the dollars a little more. So we went down from the $3 million, went down to the $2 million, trying to fund more projects all over the country, not just in California is very important to serve, but we have other states as well that have a critical need for farm worker housing. So we're trying to make sure we have the opportunity to fund as many as possible. To improve on that, we're trying to find ways to reduce and streamline our process. We're doing a lot of business process reengineering, trying to find better ways to do our programs, become better managers of the programs, so more of the dollars go actually to the implementation of the programs. So that's what we're really working on, is how to make it better, make it more streamlined, so people know the scores they get, why they scored what they did, and so they're understanding how they can compete better. With the limited resources, we need to have better ways to implement the program, and that's what we're focused on right now.
All right. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. The budget proposes a reduction of about $150 million in wastewater grants. While it is true that these grants are used to effectively write down loans, interest rates, it is also true that very small communities of 500 users or smaller, for example, simply don't have the population to afford the system. Does the USDA have any information on the impact of this proposal of smaller communities?
Thank you for that question, Congressman. And that the budget line and the support to the water and wastewater program obviously is one of the main budget authority pillars that we have throughout our program. That, along with rental assistance, and I'll ask Administrator Padalino to talk to that, but I can say that in the budget process that we were all part of, we looked at a lot of information to make some of these very difficult choices, and believe that we can continue to meet the critical part of our mission in this area. Administrator Padalino.
Okay, thank you for that. And, this request supports a grant level of $304 million together with a loan level of $1.2 billion for a total program level of $1.5 billion. With that mix, we're attempting to hit a 70-30 loan grant combination for those eligible communities. Not every community is eligible for a grant. One of the things that influenced that request was the historically low interest rates that we've seen over the last few quarters, and that provides an ability for communities to take on a little bit more loan and still maintain reasonable rates. We target our funds to the smallest communities and the poorest communities to make sure we're using those grant dollars there, and we anticipate with this request we'll be able to make about 325 grants.
Thank you.
Bishop.
Thank you very much, and welcome to all of you. In reviewing your budget, I noticed that you're proposing a major reduction of nearly 35% in funding for the Community Facilities Program. As you know, this is really the only program which is available to rural communities to assist in development and construction of everything from community centers, elderly centers, daycare centers, county offices, and so many others. In my district, they consider it a godsend, which makes me even more concerned that over the past few years, you've had a tremendous amount of unobligated balances and recoveries on an annual basis, which is very disturbing to me. I'm sure that between us, most members of the subcommittee alone could easily find any number of eligible and worthwhile projects just in our districts to use these unobligated funds and to obligate the entire $40 million. Can you explain to the subcommittee why you're having such a tremendous balance in unobligated funds over the past 3 fiscal years, and in particular, what are you now projecting that why are you now projecting that there will be an estimated $11.349 million that will be available in unobligated funds for FY15, which we're here discussing today? Why isn't this money getting out to the communities which need it? And I'll ask my second question quickly. I noticed that you proposed statutory language which essentially eliminates guaranteed loans under the Community Facilities Program. How active is the program? How active has it been over the past few years in terms of total dollar amount of guaranteed loans approved, as well as the annual default rates that have been experienced under the program? And did the department inform the authorizing committee with respect to its thoughts on the guaranteed loan program and its plans not to fund the program moving forward? Given that we just approved the new Farm Bill, why are you now asking for appropriations bill language on this program, which was touched on in the Farm Bill?
Right. Congressman, thank you for that question on what is absolutely an essential program in our rural communities, the Community Facilities Program. I'll talk globally because you actually do talk about the grant, direct loan, and guaranteed loan program in your question. I'll ask Administrator Hernandez to provide some details. First, to your question about the funding for Community Facilities Guarantee, we do propose zero funding this year, and the reason is because the way that the subsidy formulas are working with the CF Guaranteed program versus the CF Direct program, there is a subsidy needed. That is, there's budget authority required for a program level in Guaranteed for 15. That's what the projection is. Whereas in the CF Direct, that's a zero subsidy forecast. So what that means is we're able to get a program level or a loan level, a very healthy proposed $2.2 billion loan level in FY15 that we propose for no budget authority in that direct program. It's just the way that the subsidy formulas, which is primarily driven by the market interest rates today, are working, and we're just trying to make sure we get as many dollars out for the least amount of budget authority from taxpayers. So that explains the CF Guaranteed. We do not propose to eliminate the program in any way, shape, or form. We're just saying in this year, because of the way that the subsidy formula works, we don't propose budget on that.
The unobligated funds.
And I do want to talk about the unobligated funds. I think it's one of the primary examples of what has happened as a result of the significant staff cutbacks in 2012 and 2013. At the beginning of my testimony, sir, I'm sure you know, states that we've lost nearly 20% of our staff in those 2 years with the hiring freeze because of some reductions. We've had some challenges delivering every one of our programs, and this is one of those examples. The CF program as a whole, when you add grants, direct loans, and guaranteed programs together, has grown actually geometrically in the last few years because of, again, that low or that zero subsidy rate for the direct loan. So we've gotten a lot more dollars out in terms of grants and loans when you add them together. We do have some unobligated balances we're very concerned with. And in fact, this year, because of your support and the committee's support, we're able to start to hire critical hires. We're doing that in CF and we propose we want to make sure to backfill some of those critical hires
That's a
through
lot of money,
2015.
and our communities need that money,
Yes.
and are crying for it.
Yeah.
And for it to be unobligated, it's just unacceptable. It's very disturbing.
Yes, sir. I understand, and we are concerned about that, and are working to build our capacity to make sure that we can deliver those dollars to rural America.
Thank you. Let me quickly, I do want to revisit the single-family direct loan program just a minute. I don't want to spend a lot because there's been several people that's asked about it. But how many direct loans would USDA make under this budget request that you currently have FY15?
Go ahead, Tony.
We can do that. Our estimate is that we will have, for 2013, for the direct loan, we did 7,111 for 2013. No, that's for the nation.
That's right.
7,000 for the nation. Nationwide was 2013. So we will have much less than that this year. We believe it'll be around 600 loans. I'm sorry, we've done 1,048 now, year to date. So it'll be probably about to 3,000 loans, 3,000, 4,000 loans, is what we think. Now, as you know, we're actually asking for more dollars. Our budget request authority is more. It's 3 times request is more, but what has changed is the economic assumptions for the subsidy rate. So it went from 2.7% to 7.38. So we're asking for more dollars, but because it costs more to do the program, it actually reduces the amount of dollars that we have. But we're asking for more. So we're very committed to this program, and another demonstration of that commitment is how we're trying to improve how we manage the program and do more automation. So we believe we can do more, reduce the cost for operating the program. And this is a wonderful program. We need to keep funding this program.
We may come back to that, but let me move on to the budget proposes to allow the Rural Housing Service to charge a fee to lenders to access the agency's loan guarantee systems. How much it will be generated? What are we looking at as far as would be generated by this fee?
And I'll just mention and ask Administrator Hernandez to provide those data points. That this is a key strategy to your point in your opening statement, sir, on our ability to manage with integrity this very quickly growing portfolio, to be able to have the resources to have the data system to make sure that our lenders are accountable to the taxpayers. So, Tony.
You know, in order to have a fee that we can continue and enhance the way we operate the program, right now, we have no appropriation to do automation. So we're looking for a fee which is widely accepted in the industry, that the lender pays a fee that comes back to the agencies operating the program to talk about the enhancements so we can make their job easier. As a former community developer, the way I always encourage lenders to provide affordable lending is to make it as easy as possible for them to do. What they've told us and asked us, make it easier. The only way we can make it easier is to get revenue that they pay for, which means they'll probably pass it on to the home buyer, which then is included in the loan amount that we finance. The money will come back to us so we can continue and enhance that. As you know, we're not fully automated right now in the guarantee program. We're almost right. The next phase we're doing is what we call direct underwriting, delegated underwriting, to allow the lender to make the decision directly. Right now, we have to look at it, give them the decision, go back and forth, and we're doing this manually. They send us a fax, we look at it, give them the decision, send a fax back. They then send us a check. We have to open the check, process the check. What we're hoping to do with this automation is allow direct underwriting, that they will pay for a fee, so it makes it easier for them to close more loans, get more people into home ownership, and it continually pays for itself. So we don't have to come back to Congress, because this program has a negative subsidy today. So we're trying to make sure this program continues to be successful, but the best way to make it successful is reduce the manual intervention, which we're doing a tremendous amount of that. And we're on score right now to get that automation, and this fee will help us stay there and continue to enhance the program. So we're very excited about this automation.
So most all of the fee would be used for automation?
It's for automation.
Yeah, it'd be dedicated. And there is precedent in HUD FHA. They use a fee like this.
How often would a lender be charged this fee?
A lender will be charged on loan closing. So when they close a loan, it's $50 per loan.
Okay. Oh, does the budget reduce spending in other areas to account for the revenues generated by the fee?
No.
Oh, how much access are lenders allowed to have in the system?
Well, Today, again, it's not quite automated, so they only have limited access to the GUS system, government underwriting system. It's very limited. When they have delegated underwriting, they don't have access to the system to make decisions. And what that means, they won't have to ask us for our judgment to give them a yes or a no. So they'll have full access once we have delegated underwriting, which we're not there yet. So it won't come until later in the fall. I think it's the fall timeframe, but I'll check that to make sure.
What protocols have you got in place for the security of the system?
Great question. Security is so important in this because we have lots of information here to make sure we are protecting all that information, financial information. So we're working tremendously with our IT staff to ensure there's significant protection of people's property, which is their information. So security, income, all those things that are there. We're working tirelessly to make sure that happens. So we're not done yet with that, and that's why we're working with IT. And you have funded us this way to make sure we put the right proper protection in our program.
Mr. Farr?
I've been having these sort of questions for folks in your positions with each panel. And it seems to me that we have reached a point in development in this country of sophistication enough to know what are the key ingredients of community development of the war on poverty. I mean, it's sort of like medicine. They're starting to standardize procedures. There's only so many ways you can take out an appendix. So why don't we just take the basic standards and, fund those on it? What my frustration with is, and I think this is a frustration that everybody feels about the federal government, is there's so much of it. It's not too much government, it's too many governments. And each of those governments or silos that you have administrative costs. And I just get the feelings once in a while that our programs that we're administering cost more than the benefit that reaches Main Street. And I think this is what you're trying to do and consolidate and look at and use out the IT. My question is, and I really appreciate your looking at your strike force for rural growth and opportunity, and identifying those 20 states in which the poorest counties in the United States are. And those are counties. Is there a process that you're developing where you can start to begin to see what the host county or host state needs to do to have in its basic ordinances and infrastructure in order to sustain the help that you're giving?
Yeah.
Because we've been throwing money at this problem for 30 years, and it's been essentially Band-Aid, and as you indicated, or the Secretary indicated, these same counties have been poor every single census. It's sort of like our foreign aid program. If we're so damn good at it, how come these poorest countries are always the poorest countries? They never get better.
Right.
So I think it's a responsibility for the federal government to begin putting some pressure back on by exposure to what states have developed this capacity infrastructure and use that as a carrot to these states and say, look, we'll be here to help you and here's all the ways we can. But my God, you've got to start doing some stuff. It's sort of like we're doing with floodplain zoning. We finally get along and say, okay, it wasn't us, it was the casualty insurance companies. Said, we're not going to keep insuring these houses. If you want to rebuild them, go ahead, but you're not going to get insurance for it.
Right.
Or it's going to be cost prohibitive.
Right.
We ought to be doing that little bit of a carrot to these states. I mean, I know that as a county supervisor, I was always going to ask, who's doing this better?
Right.
Who does it smarter? Or if when I was a state legislator, what other states are doing this stuff more? We have a National Association of State Legislators. We have a National Association of County elected officials, of mayors, and they're all just like us. They're looking for. And I think the problem we have, and the federal government ought to be the lead agency, is how do we work ourselves out of a job? You ought not to have to be back in those same counties every year after year.
Right. Right.
Why have other states have poor counties, but they're not on your list?
Right.
They're doing something that these 20 states aren't doing.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I'll try to be brief because, as you know, Congressman Secretary Vilsack and the team here at Rural Development are doing a lot in this space, so I'll try to just highlight a few things. In terms of making sure that our local partners, all the way up from, local, county, up to the state, are the best partners possible so that the federal dollars can make the greatest impact. A couple things we're doing. Internally, over the last year and a half, we've done a deeper dive on the capacity of each of the states to do community economic development. And not surprising, we found it's across the board. Some places, I'm from Iowa. A lot of Iowa is very evolved in its capacity to do economic development. What we need to do there is make sure that folks have the easiest time of accessing our programs. We don't have to do the economic development for them. We have to make sure to partner and support them. Other places, typically in Appalachia, the Delta, Indian Country, and the southwest border, and then in other places, like in Maine, in Michigan, certainly in different parts through the valley in California. We find because of low-resource communities, they have a much harder time just having the capacity and accessing our programs, what Strike Force is about. But we're doing that throughout rural development and working with our state directors so each of them have a strategy that fits the different communities in their state in terms of our engagement. Now, to your question about what are we doing to make sure that local communities and states are adopting these best practices in community economic development. It's not a mystery anymore, sir. Something that the authorizers provided the Secretary in the Farm Bill was the ability to prioritize projects that are part of a multi-jurisdictional strategic economic development plan, and they provided some pretty rigorous bounds on what that means, and a lot of that is the best practice that you're talking about, that there's broad collaboration, that the progress of the strategy is measured, that there's a plan to leverage as many private nonprofit dollars as possible. So we're beginning, it's part of our Farm Bill implementation, and we're beginning this year through our administrative process, NOFA, NOSIS, et cetera, to make sure that applicants understand that what we want to do, and we're prioritizing, is helping those projects and those communities that are doing that best practice. And we'll be utilizing and drafting a regulation in the future.
Put some burden back on the local state responsibility of, hey, you guys, own up. These are sort of the common best management practices.
Right.
You know what we do in California? The highway department has to, they won't help counties that don't go out and raise their own revenues.
Right.
They said, if you're not a self-help county, you go to the end of the line, and if there's any money left over, we'll do your projects.
Right.
It's hustling. Nobody likes taxes, but if they say if that's the only way we can get our roads repaired and built, then we're willing to tax ourselves. And I think that's a tough way to do it, but it's a responsible way.
Right.
Why should we be helping those who don't want to help themselves?
Right. Now, and we do, and I think probably the water program might be the best example of a very sort of evolved way of making sure that local communities provide as much as they can. There's in the water program, the lower resource a community, the more grant that they can receive. But if they're a high resource community, we require them to do, essentially all loan. We're trying to bring more of that sophistication into our other programs. And then at the same time, while it's not a requirement, I think it's a carrot that you talked about in this priority that we received in the Farm Bill, that making clear to communities that do the best practice that they're going to have some priority. Thank you.
Pingree.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, thank you for all your testimony today. I just have one other thing I want to ask about. So, this is about HFFI in rural communities. Because of the passage of the Farm Bill included the expansion of the Healthy Food Financing Institute and a new home for it at the USDA, your agency, RD, will be looking this over. So I'm a very strong advocate of this program, and it's important to communities to improve healthy food access and build local economies and enhance public health. I think a lot of people, when they hear the term food desert, either their eyes glaze over or they think it's something specifically about inner city neighborhoods. And it's, of course, very important to make sure that urban areas have more access to healthy foods. But I think people often don't understand that in rural communities, and Maine is a very rural state, we have a lot of people who don't have access to healthy food. In some counties in Maine, Aroostook County, Washington County, that are more remote, people often have to drive hours to a grocery store that has the ability to meet their needs, or a farm stand, or many of the other things they might go to. So I think it's really important that a program like this also looks at rural areas' needs. And I just want to hear from you, does the program have the flexibility to serve the needs of rural communities as well as urban ones? How can we make sure that some of the unique characteristics of these communities are available through RD, and that it works with the CDFIs to prepare some of the criteria necessary to evaluate the proposals?
Yeah, and thank you for that question, Congresswoman. The Healthy Food Financing Initiative, of course, was authority provided in the 2014 Farm Bill, the new loan grant program, and we made a decision within the department that rural development was the best place to administer that because of our expertise in providing loans to small businesses and working with nonprofits. We certainly have and understand the need for access to food in rural places. I think we have a particular expertise through our rural business and cooperative service and otherwise in making sure that businesses can be successful in this type of social mission. And in particular in here, I think with CDFIs and actually social impact investors, I think there's some real opportunity to really leverage some real dollars to do good things in rural America. So that rural places are certainly going to be our focus, but it does go beyond rural places. That's the authority to also go into urban places. So,
Great. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bishop.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask for something for the record. Can you give me the status of all of the outstanding broadband projects in the state of Georgia, and in particular in my district, and also can you give us an update on the projects that were approved under the stimulus program nationwide, and how many of them have been completed with 100% of the funding obligated and expected broadband services are up and running? How many are 75%? How many are 50%? And in my district, would you give me an update on the performance? So I think that was a grant that was awarded in 2010 to SGV. Could you kind of give me an update on that?
Administrator Padalino.
Sure, thank you for that. I'll start the big picture and work our way down to Sagrita with that information. The Recovery Act provided an enormous amount of funds to fund broadband projects. Between loan and grant, it was $3.2 billion. We've dispersed over 70% of those funds to 255 projects, and those projects are many of them are still under construction, on target to be complete by September 30th, 2015. We have 44 of those 255, 44 of those projects are fully complete, fully constructed, and people are receiving service. We have another 183 projects of that 255 that are partially operational, meaning part of the funded service area has service available to some of the residents. And those, especially as we're entering the spring and summer build-out seasons, we expect many more cutovers to happen, be in the fourth year of the construction. For South Georgia Regional Information Technology Authority, they received a $6.6 million loan and a $6.6 million grant that together was a two-phase project, a wireless and a wireline. Part of that wireless project, it's my understanding, is available to some residents, and I was researching that project last night and understand that the borrowers, the recipients, focused on building out the fiber part of that project this year. Almost all of the funds of that project are under construction right now, and we expect that to be completed on time by the end of next summer.
Thank you for that. Could you provide that information for us in writing?
Yes, I could provide you the detailed information on Georgia and telecommunications in general, telephone companies and broadband companies, what we funded there, and by your district.
Thank you. I want to go back to Mr. Fortenberry's concern about the consolidation of your rural loan programs. Particularly, I have an interest in the Rural Micro Entrepreneur Assistance Program. You know, you're going to create a new economic development grant program which will merge all of these programs, but I'm concerned, as was Mr. Fortenberry, with the lack of focus once you consolidate them. It seems to me that the micro loan program is probably the best bang for the buck that you could possibly have, because it's so small and it's a revolving fund. And it seems to me that you kind of, it gets lost in the wash, if you will, if you put it together with all of these other programs that are bigger and perhaps more exotic. How can we make sure that the focus remains, and that with the few staff that you have, that they fund these organizations that can make these micro loans, which are revolving. I mean, they will go on forever.
Right. And I'll ask Administrator Salerno to talk a little bit. I just want to pick up on a couple of your points. The first on the bang for the buck for this type of program, and we agree that, in fact, is why if you add up the grant programs that we propose to streamline and look at that number, we actually increase, and it's, again, one of the few places that we propose an increase in this budget in grant in total, and that would incur and include the RMAP program. The reason we do that is because we think that capacity building for small businesses, many times that is the hurdle for the small business, and we think that that's a critical place and where a dollar can go farther. You also mentioned that with the few people that we have, how can we make sure that there will remain a focus? I can absolutely say RMAP is a very important program for us, the loan side of that. And we'll continue to be focused on it. And because of the relatively small number of staff that we have in RBCS, that in fact is what drove us to try and make sure that we streamline these programs as much as possible so that we can have the most effective implementation with the least amount of people. And I ask Administrator Salerno.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I'm a former small business owner and from a rural town in Texas, and I think the reason this is a good idea is because we want to use as much of our resources to do the outreach and those fixed costs to do all the programs. We understand that and recognize that anytime you're consolidating, certain constituencies are going to be, worried about it. But I think the Farm Bill's given us a real good idea of how we're going to implement, and I think it provides an opportunity for us to look at this and make sure that we use all the staff resources on outreach and delivery of the programs rather than some of the administrative stuffs we have to do by having these 5 small programs.
Lump it together, though, it gives you more flexibility in terms of, for example, you're suggesting that you could make more and you would have more funds, more resources available for the micro, the MRAP program, the RMAP program, excuse me, than you would have had before. Because that would allow you, if you had the need, to expand the resources, whereas maybe you might not have as much need, or you may choose not to utilize as many of the resources of some of these other programs. Is that what you're suggesting? It gives you more flexibility?
No, I think the flexibility is that the limited resources we have to administer it, that we're doing it. We have a consolidated grant program, so we're not having to put out 5 different NOFAs, 5 different reviews, and instead we'll be utilizing those resources to make sure we do outreach.
I understand that you'll have one infrastructure, but will it give you flexibility also so that you could perhaps make more micro enterprise loans?
I think that the intent, and we
all of the money is lumped together.
Right.
The program is consolidated.
The intent would be to continue to serve all of the different constituencies that are currently served. So while it would provide us some flexibility, I think that we would want to continue down the path that the traditional direction that this committee in Congress has provided us in terms of somewhat proportionally serving all these different types of entities.
I mean, you say proportionally, but what I'm trying to, that it still gives you the discretion as to decide what that proportion is.
And we'd be happy to work with this committee in terms of how we could exercise that discretion. I think there's a lot of ways that you could make sure that we're working in a way that meets the intent of this committee.
Are your hands tied? And with your proposal for consolidating, will your hands be tied, or will they be? Will you have more flexibility than you previously had without consolidating?
I think we'd have more flexibility than we previously have. Yeah, but our intent is to continue to do it to make sure that all the different entities are served. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think we're just concluding. Let me just end with one question. I wanted to ask about rural electric program fee proposal. The budget proposes to allow rural utility services to charge its borrowers a fee for environmental and historical preservation reviews. There are a number of federal programs that allow for fee-for-service. Some are successful. Just a little idea about this proposal. And Mr. Padalino, this may be a question that would be directed mainly at you. How much money would be collected through this proposal?
We don't know that answer at this time. We haven't been able to finance baseload generation for a number of years because the losses they're not included as part of the subsidy rate calculation, so we don't really have that historical data going back in recent years. We've been working internally with the Farm Bill implementation team to figure out if we have to implement that proposal by regulation or how we need to articulate that, and kind of as that becomes more clear, I think we'll have more information on that, and I'd be happy to supplement,
Okay.
Going down the road.
Okay, and explain exactly how the fees would be used.
The fees would go to help pay for the subsidy cost associated with making the loan for the generation facility.
And do you anticipate hiring permanent staff with the fees?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much all for being here this morning and a little bit this afternoon. We appreciate your service to USDA and especially to rural development across which it means so much to rural America. And with that, we stand adjourned.
Thank you, sir.